Ever since Dragon Age 2 came out early last year, the public opinion of BioWare, at least on the internet, has grown more and more negative. While Dragon Age 2 was definitely not as good as the original, it was still a decent game with some minor and some more significant problems. This hate for Dragon Age 2 among the more outspoken BioWare fans has spilled over to Mass Effect 3, and for a sequel to a multiple Game of the Year award winner, it sure has gotten a lot of hate prior to its release. After having played the game myself, I am happy to say that Mass Effect 3 is absolutely a worthy entry in the series, and an early contender for Game of the Year. Just a warning, there will be minor story spoilers in this review, but I'm not going to discuss anything that hasn't already been shown in gameplay videos and trailers. Mass Effect 3 is the conclusion to the trilogy, and the finale for Commander Shepard and his war against the Reapers. With the change in lead writers, I was a bit worried about whether the story and characters would reach the same heights as the last two games, but Mass Effect 3 is mostly good in this respect. The writing can get cheesy at times, but for the most part, it's well done. At the beginning of the game, the Reapers have finally arrived, attacking Earth and dozens of other planets across the galaxy, primarily targeting the homeworlds of the various races. After a very brief segment on Earth, Shepard flees in the Normandy to venture out into the galaxy and gather the fleets of the various Citadel races in the hopes of amassing a large enough force for a counterattack.
About time! Let's go!
The majority of the game is spent traveling across the galaxy, requesting help from pretty much every major Mass Effect race. This stuff is really well done, and it's great to see the homeworlds of some of the iconic Mass Effect races. Along the way, you'll run into plenty of friends and enemies, and the game provides satisfying conclusions to the individual story arcs of pretty much every character from the first two games. If you have a favorite character, chances are you'll be pleased with how their story wraps up. That is, unless you happen to be a huge fan of either Zaid or Kasumi, as they are the only characters who don't get a full-on mission and are just as poorly implemented here as they were in the main game of Mass Effect 2. As for squad members, there are only 6 this time around, 7 if you count the DLC character, and 4 of them are Mass Effect 1 characters, with James Vega being the only new character to join your team.
Sounds like fun. Never been to the Turian homeworld.
One of the defining features of the Mass Effect trilogy, the ability to transfer your saves from one game to another, has been promised to pay off big in this last game, and ultimately its implementation is hit or miss. The game does do a great job of letting you know that it knows what you've done in the past. Things you've done in the past are constantly being referenced, and there are even a few occasions where they do make a big impact.
Just like you're getting what you want, Shepard.
What are you talking about?
I found out you had access to Malin's data and destroyed it.
There are many characters that could have died in past games that have fairly major roles in this one, and I look forward to playing through again to see some of these changes. In other instances, though, the decisions have little impact. For example, if you destroyed the genophage cure in Mass Effect 2, it doesn't prevent the genophage from being cured in this game. It only adds a minor consequence. Even if the decisions of past games don't drastically affect the course of the plot, it is cool to see past choices constantly being referenced, and it does make your experience feel very personal. As for the DLC character, if you're one of those worrying about whether or not this character was vital to the game, you can rest easy. While the character is very interesting and seamlessly integrated into the main game, unlike past DLC characters, he is of zero consequence in the overall plot and serves only as an interesting but inconsequential addition. I'm by no means defending the decision to make this paid content, but it's not necessary at all to have fully experienced the game. The way the game handles characters is actually a big improvement over the past games in the series. The biggest improvement has to be the way your various teammates interact with each other, both on the ship and on missions. In past games, characters would occasionally chime in during missions, but each character just said a variation of the same thing, so the conversations would make sense no matter which characters you happen to have in your group. In Mass Effect 3, there are unique conversations for any combination of characters. No matter who you bring on any given mission, they will have unique dialogue with each other. On the ship, characters don't simply wait at one spot all the time, doing calibrations and waiting for you to come talk to them. You can engage in conversations with your characters at various spots on the ship and even on the Citadel. Characters may even visit each other on the ship, and you can walk in and listen to them having conversations. Given that, for the most part, teammates only interacted with Shepard in past games, it's great to see more character interactions in this game.
Also a big expose on Quasar tournaments, tips on how to make your apartment look bigger, and oh yeah, a big-ass Reaper invasion.
The only thing that really disappointed me about the story was the ending. I didn't really have a problem with the Deus Ex Machina that was introduced very early in the game, simply because it is more implausible that the civilizations of the galaxy would have any chance of defeating the Reapers in a conventional battle. None of the three endings, nearly indistinguishable from one another, provide any sort of meaningful resolution to the story you've been creating over the past 3 games. My biggest problem is the way they try to explain the origins and motivations of the Reapers. I was perfectly content with the explanation Vigil gave in the first game.
The Reapers are alien, unknowable. Perhaps they need slaves or resources. More likely they are driven by motives and goals organic beings cannot hope to comprehend. In the end, what does it matter? Your survival depends on stopping them, not in understanding them.
That explanation was perfect and kept the Reapers as mysterious, powerful beings that are unknowable. It's much better than the contrived and convoluted so-called answers we get at the end of Mass Effect 3. To put it bluntly, the ending sucks, and it puts a stain on the series as a whole. And by the ending, I don't mean the last few hours or even the last mission. I mean like the last 10 minutes. And ultimately, it's not enough to ruin the awesome 30 plus hours it took to get there, or the 2 fantastic games that have come before it. The game is structured very similar to past games in the series. After a fairly brief linear segment at the start of the game, you gain access to the Normandy and the galaxy map and are free to explore as you see fit. There are far fewer side quests than past games in the series, but more main story quests than either of the past 2 games. In addition to the dozen or so main story quests, there are several main side quests, very similar to loyalty missions from Mass Effect 2, except instead of getting the loyalty of a teammate, you are helping out a race or faction. These quests are where many of the Mass Effect 2 characters show up. It can get a little too coincidental at times, so much so that you'll be able to predict who will show up based on what the mission is. A Krogan mission? Well, I bet Grunt's gonna be there.
See anything? Let me know.
Grunt?
Shepard? Shepard!
What are you doing here?
I could ask you the same question.
Putting that aside, these missions are of the same high quality as the main story missions. Even the N7 missions, of which there are only 6, have a full briefing and debriefing, as well as character-specific mission dialogue, which is a big step up from the N7 missions in Mass Effect 2. The actual level design is similar to Mass Effect 2, though a bit improved. Missions play out like linear shooter levels with sporadic dialogue and objectives. The levels are much more vertical now, and cover layout feels a bit less contrived than Mass Effect 2, though just a bit. The Citadel is the only hub world this time around, though it is far bigger than it has been in past games. It makes sense that the Citadel is the only hub world, since most of the planets are under attack from the Reapers. It wouldn't really make much sense to be shopping on Tuchanka or Thessia while the Reapers attack. Because there are only 6 real combat-oriented side quests in the game, there are a lot more fetch quests than past games. These usually amount to overhearing someone on the Citadel talking about something they need, then, without even talking to them, you go find it. This usually requires you to use the game's version of planet scanning. Instead of scanning for minerals, you scan for quest items, upgrades, and war assets. The scanning process is similar but much faster, though it isn't very compelling. Honestly, I think I would have preferred the Mass Effect 2 planet scanning, though the new system serves its purpose adequately. The crux of the game is the Galactic Readiness, which is basically a rating that determines your effectiveness in the final assault against the Reapers. As you gain allies, find equipment, and improve morale, your overall readiness goes up. Everything you do feeds back into this rating, and it makes even the most mundane fetch quests feel like they serve some sort of purpose. While some might find the relatively small amount of side quests disappointing, the focus on the main quests, and the fact that every single quest has to do with preparing for the Reapers, benefits the overall tone of the game. It would feel really out of place if you're doing the types of side quests you do in past games, like fighting mercenaries, fixing a broken mech, or helping a Hanar smuggle contraband. When compared to Mass Effect 2 in particular, the game feels like everything you do is related to the overall plot, whereas in Mass Effect 2, 90% of the game consisted of side quests. If you're wondering about the length, it took me just over 32 hours to finish, doing almost everything. In comparison, my first playthroughs of the first 2 games were 29 and 33 hours respectively, so the amount of content is comparable. Obviously, the game has multiplayer, but I'm not going to get into that here. If you want to know what I thought of the multiplayer, you can watch my impressions video, and I'll leave a link in the description. Other than having 4 additional maps in the more expensive Spectre crate, which guarantees one of the highest tier of item, the multiplayer isn't really changed from the demo.
Push him back!
Combat-wise, Mass Effect 3 is the best the series has ever been, and I really like the combat in Mass Effect 2. Shepard now has more mobility, and overall the combat feels a lot faster and more responsive. Though I know some RPG elitists consider better combat to be dumbing down, I am absolutely in favor of the improved combat. What people need to realize is that Mass Effect has always been an action RPG, with a focus on third-person shooting and a strong story with dialogue and decisions. It was never meant to be a hardcore stat-driven RPG, and remembering the first game through rose-colored glasses doesn't make that any less true. I loved the first game, but the combat was not the game's strong suit, and making it play more like a proper action game isn't some betrayal, it's an improvement. I have heard some people say the combat is just generic third-person shooter gameplay, but these people likely played as a soldier. I must stress that soldier is the worst way to play the game, and I urge you to play as any other class. With that little rant out of the way, I can say with confidence that if you removed everything else from the game, Mass Effect 3 could still stand on its own as one of the better third-person shooters available. What really sets the combat apart from other third-person shooters is the powers. The powers are more effective and more fun to use than ever. For the first time, I feel like you can actually get away with not really using guns at all as one of the more power-focused classes. I played as an adept, and the majority of my kills came from biotic detonations, and only really having to fire my gun against tougher enemies like heavy mechs. This is helped by the new weight system. Basically, any class can use any gun, but the less you carry, the faster your powers recharge. I rolled around with one of the lighter assault rifles and nothing else, allowing my powers to regenerate 200% faster. Even things like Singularity recharged almost immediately, allowing me to focus on powers instead of guns. Speaking of guns, there are a lot of them in the game. The first game had tons of guns, but they were all the same aside from some stat differences. In the second game, every gun was unique, but there were only 2 or 3 per category. Mass Effect 3 combines both of these systems. I didn't take the time to count, but there are probably over 30 unique guns in the game. Each gun looks and behaves differently and can also be upgraded and modified. Upgrades improve the base attributes, while mods add effects like scopes, increased ammo capacity, and minor cover penetration. The increased customization adds a layer of strategy to outfitting you and your teammates, and is definitely a welcome feature. In addition to the added weapon customization, the leveling has been expanded as well. Each class now has more abilities, there are more branching paths for each skill, and the level cap has been raised to 60. If you import a level 30 Mass Effect 2 character, you will start at level 30. Overall, the improvements to the RPG mechanics are definitely a great addition, and ultimately the game combines the deeper RPG elements of Mass Effect 1 with the solid gameplay of Mass Effect 2 to create the best playing game in the series. The other major aspect of gameplay, dialogue, has also been changed a bit. In past games, you'd be presented with the dialogue wheel every time Shepard would speak. Shepard would very rarely ever say anything without input from the player, but this is no longer the case. There are far fewer dialogue choices in Mass Effect 3, with the game only requiring input from the player at certain points in conversations. I was initially very put off by this change, but as I thought more about it, I understood why they did it, and even grew to appreciate it. In past games, most of the dialogue choices didn't affect the conversations at all. Many times, different options resulted in Shepard voicing the exact same lines. By removing the superficial choices, you know every choice you were given will impact the conversation in some way. Also, by not having to stop as often to get superficial input from the player, Shepard and the other characters can move around a lot more during conversations, and it results in a better flow. The amount of impact you have over the conversations is about the same as past games, and there are still plenty of opportunities to investigate. All that has really been removed is some of the illusion of choice.
Yeah.
Like many aspects of the game, the visuals are the best the series has ever been. While alien races have always looked good, humans have been a bit weird looking, so it's a good thing that one of the biggest improvements is the look of human characters. Hair looks less like it's painted on, and facial animations and lip syncing have been improved as well. Shepard's expressions now look much less weird, especially the infamous smile.
How far?
Environments look outstanding, and some of the vistas are simply amazing. As you would expect, the CG space cutscenes are expertly done, with the biggest and most spectacular space battles the series has ever had. Frame rate does drop occasionally, more than Mass Effect 2, but usually this is limited only to the overcrowded Citadel. I rarely encountered frame rate issues during combat, which is where it really matters. The audio presentation is also up to the high standards you'd expect from a Mass Effect game. Even though it features a whole new crew of composers, the music is just as good as past games and sounds like it belongs in a Mass Effect game. There are many cases where the music perfectly captures the feeling of impending doom and the theme of sacrifice present throughout the game, and it can also get you pumped up when the situation calls for it. The voice acting is exactly what you'd expect, which is to say, fantastic.
Age was the only way to keep your urges in check.
Dalatrash, you may not like him, but Rex is right. Insulting him won't change that.
Even Mark Meir, voice actor for Male Shepherd, who has gotten some slack in the past for being less than stellar, turns in a pretty good performance. He's still not the best member of the cast, but it's by far his best performance.
Your people should have thought the matter through then. Was it really a surprise that...
Weapon sounds have also been improved, which can definitely be noticed when hearing guns being fired from a distance. Biotic detonations also have a really cool sound when they go off, making them very satisfying. Mass Effect 3 was one of my most anticipated games ever, and for the first 32 hours, I was not disappointed. It is the best looking and best playing game in the series, with tons of awesome sequences and some great character moments as well. There are even some genuinely well done emotional moments thrown in, and I was ready to call this game the best in the series. Then the last 10 minutes happened, and I was left dumbfounded. I can't stress enough how much I hate the ending. Not only does it spit on things that have been established in past games, but it nearly destroys the possibility of me liking any games in the series set after Mass Effect 3. Even if the ending had been simply okay, I would have called this the best game in the series without hesitation. But even with the ending, the game is still well worth playing and a must-buy for fans of the series. You know what they say, it's about the journey, not the destination, and I don't think that saying has ever been more true. While I can recommend this game without hesitation to fans of the series, if you haven't played a Mass Effect game before, don't buy into the marketing. With the constant references to past games and the assumption that you know what's going on, I don't see how anyone who hasn't played the past games will get anything out of this one. If you're interested in the series, start at the beginning. These games are made to be played in order, with save game transfers, and that's how you should do it.
Is this what Shepard warned us about?
I'd stake my life on it.
How long do we have?
Not long. I sent word. The fleets are mobilizing.
My final score for Mass Effect 3 is a 9.6 out of 10. Be sure to head on over to GamingIrresponsibly.com for more reviews, news, and previews.